In this lesson, I want to spend a little bit of time and talk about working with multiple tables and also understanding table aliases. And throughout our previous lessons, you'd have seen me open several tables simultaneously and also mentioned or alluded to table aliases. In this lesson, we're going to try to get a little bit more in depth with that. Now, when you start Visual FoxPro, the default work area selected is work area 1. And the question you would ask is, what is a work area? Well, a work area simply is a numbered region that identifies a table. And what I'll do, let me just go ahead and open a table right now. So we'll work from the data session window for this lesson. We go open. And we're in the Microsoft Visual FoxPro starter folder, which is not where I want to be. So we'll change that to okay, and I'll open the export one table. And right here, the data session window is telling me that in work area 1 is where I have the table. And so we have, in fact, quite a number of work areas that we can use. Visual FoxPro actually supports up to 32767 work areas. So we can open over 32,000 tables simultaneously in Visual FoxPro. I'm not sure if you'll ever have a need for that, but that's the capacity that we have. And so by default, only one table can be open in a given work area. For instance, in work area 1, I could not have another table in here. Each work area number represents one and only one table. I can open another table. Now select my new table 1, click OK, and automatically FoxPro will select the next available work area. And that is why it uses the clause here in 0. In 0 says find the next available work area or the next unused work area and open that table there. So it doesn't close my existing table. It goes to a new area and open it. And this is work area 2 as indicated here. Okay, the data session window also tells me the number of records that I have in the table, and if I have my status bar on, of course, I can tell the number of records also. So in export 1, I have 6. My new table 1, I have 27 records. And I can just keep opening tables, and Visual FoxPro will just open them in the next available area. Okay, and one more. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 6 tables open. So I'm using it work areas 1 through 6. So that's it. In a nutshell, that is how we work with multiple tables. We simply specify the work area or an unused work area that would like to open our table in. If I wanted to use, let's see what other tables available. Sample data, for example, in work area 4. Notice that I have my table 1 open in that work area. If I were to open, and I'd have to do this from the command window, because when I use the data session window to open, it will automatically use the in 0 clause, which will open it in a different work area. And you can look at these commands here. Select and the number selects a given work area. So to select my table 1, I would simply say select work area number 4, press enter key, and that's the selected work area. We could do so for 1 as well. Notice that the graphic display is updated. I want to go back to work area 4, and I'm going to use sample underscore data in the same work area. And notice that it closes the my table 1, and now sample data is open in the data session window, or rather in the work area number 4. Okay, So we're still in work area number 4. So if you open another table in a work area where an existing table is already opened, it will automatically close that table prior to opening the newly specified table. I could also have, let's open, let's see what other table is there I can open. Okay, my table 3. I can open, let's see, export 1 is in work area 1. I can open a table in a specified work area like this, use my table 3 and I'll specify the work area 1. And thus it closes export 1 and opens my table 3 in that work area. So that's it for working with multiple tables. Now the next thing I want to go on to is working with aliases. And you'll notice, if I go back here quickly, most of the tables, the file names of the .dbf extension, when they're open in Visual FoxPro, have the same alias as their table name. So by default, when you open a table, Visual FoxPro will assign an alias which happens to be the same name as the table if it qualifies as a proper alias for a table. An alias must begin with either a letter of the alphabet or an underscore. It can be up to 254 characters in length, cannot have any spaces. Some of the standard stuff for actually I was about to say file name, but in fact Visual FoxPro does support long file name, which does support spaces. But an alias does not support a space, and an alias cannot begin with a number, otherwise it would conflict with the work area number itself. So to demonstrate aliases, let's close all these tables. And what I'm going to do is to open, so I'll go use, and that should be in table 1. So close all sets us back to work area 1. So what I'm going to do is open this table again, my table 3. So what I'll do, I'll say open in 0, and I'll use the again clause. That's the only way Visual FoxPro will allow me to open the same table within the same data session. And we'll talk more about data session when we look at forms and private data sessions. So this should open this table again, and what we're going to see is that Visual FoxPro will automatically assign a different alias to my table 3. When I opened it initially, the default alias was the same as the name. When I try to open the same table again without specifying a new alias or a user-defined alias, Visual FoxPro will choose one for me. Let's see what it chooses. It chooses a letter of the alphabet. Now, for the first 10 work areas, let's put some notes here on the screen. So from 1 to 10, the first 10 work areas, Visual FoxPro will actually use the letters A to J to represent those aliases if you don't specify a default alias. And not to get you confused, that would only happen as in the case where I show you here, where we have a conflict in alias name. So when I attempted to open my table 3 again, Visual FoxPro would have or attempted to give it the same alias, but given that that alias, my table 3, was already in use, it had no choice but to use a default alias based on the work area. So for work area 1, the default alias, in case there's a conflict, is letter A. The second one will be B. The third work area C, and so forth, right down to work area number 10, which is J. When we get beyond work area 10, I'll show you what happens here. If I were to use my table 3 in 11 again, After work area 10, Visual FoxPro starts with a W, and this it will go up. It will start from W11 up to W32767, and this becomes the default alias when there is a conflict. Now, I'm using the same table, my table 3, in 3 separate work areas, and when I don't specify a default alias, Visual FoxPro selects one for me. I'm going to go ahead now and open the table one more time, a 4th time, but this time I'm going to specify an alias. And what I will do, let's do it this way. We can select the work area first, so I'll select 0, which says select the next available or the next unused work area, and that happens to be whatever it is. I'll find out as soon as I open the table. Then I'll say use my table 3 again, and now I'll specify the alias using the alias clause here. I'll say I want to call this my alias TBL. It's pretty long, but it should be okay. And so when I do specify an alias, Visual FoxPro will use, of course, the alias I specify. If I use a table and there is a conflict in the alias name, Visual FoxPro will use a default alias based on the work area number. If it's in work area 2, the default alias will be B. If it's in work area 3, the default alias will be C. And I can demonstrate that if it was so this is in work area 3. So what I'll do, just to demonstrate it, I'm hoping that you're following with me here. If I open this again in 4, can you guess what the default work area will be? It should be D. And I can put a comment here by say default work area equal D. And see, because now, again, there is a conflict with the my table 3. I did not specify an alias as I did from my aliased TBL, and so it defaults based on the work area number to work area D. And of course, you've seen where I can select a work area by specifying the work area number. Select 1 should go to work area 1, select 2 goes to work area 2, and so forth. I can also select the work area by specifying if there's a table open there, I can specify the alias of the table and get there. If there's no table, then we'll get an error message. So I can go and say select D as well. In fact, because of I can always select the default work area, whether there's a table or not. Say, for example, I could select E, though there is no table in there because E is a default alias, and so that will always work. Okay, and say I didn't get an error. Now, if I try to select, let's say, my alias TBL2, I did not create or did not open a table with that alias, so I should get an error from Visual FoxPro saying alias is not found. But the default aliases can always be referenced, so I can use either the numbers or the default alias, or if I do have a valid alias, like I do here, I can specify the name here, select, and I got an error. Select my, I missed it, ED here. So there we go. And we can select an alias. So let's do a quick recap. We've looked at working with multiple tables. We said that Visual FoxPro supports up to 32,767 work areas, which are simply numbered regions in which that are associated with an open table. And we also said that when Visual FoxPro opens a table by default, the table name becomes the table alias. Now, when there is a clash in the alias name, Visual FoxPro will use a default alias. of some sort. I actually want to show you one more thing before I end this session. Let's close all here, and I'm going to rename export1 dbf. I'm going to actually put a space in here, so it's export space 1, and try to open this and see what Visual FoxPro does in terms of aliasing. Because the space is not a valid alias character, Visual FoxPro will actually give this a default alias. I'm not sure what it will be. Let's see. Actually, so what it does, it puts an underscore in there for us, so we can still recognize the name export underscore 1 instead of export space 1. So you can see here that I've opened the table export space 1, but yet the alias is defaulted to export underscore 1 and so forth. Let's try something else with sample. I think the same will happen with sample data. Let's rename this. Put a space here, and what I'll do, I'll actually put a number here which is invalid for an alias. And let's see. Okay, so it's one sample 1 dbf. Let's open this and see what Visual FoxPro does. And so, yeah, it simply just says, okay, you're going into the second work area, and it uses the default alias B. I truly hope this was not too confusing. If you do have any questions, please send me an email at feedback@learnvisualfoxpro.com. Now, one other thing, there are a few things that I failed to point out, like what is the benefit of being able to open multiple tables at the same time? Or rather, given that we can open multiple tables at the same time, how do I now reference those tables despite where I am? And this is one of the key things. Regardless of what is your current work area, you can always reference an alias table by simply specifying the alias name followed by any fields that are a part of that table. So here we have two tables, and we look at the table name here. It's one sample data and export 1. I think they should contain basically the same information. What I'm going to do is to just change the record pointer a bit. I'm going to move for alias B. I'll move to the third record, which is Randy Doom, and close that browse window. I'm still on the third record. I'll go to export 1, and I'm going to go down to Mary Polychronis, record number 6 in export 1. And so what you'll see is that I can, from here, display information from from the table aliased by B. I can say print b.fname, and see IntelliSense is giving me some help here. If I print the first name, it says Randy, and I could, let's clear the screen a bit. Do this again, print plus and plus b dot last name, and I get the full name. Even though my current work area is work area 1, as displayed here on the data sessions window. Likewise, whether I'm in the current data session or not, I can still choose to qualify my table using the alias that it has to extract data. So let's print information from export 1, which is a bit lengthy, fname, and this of course should show us information on Mary Polychronis because that was where we placed the record pointer. Notice I can leave off for last name, given that I am printing from this table. I can choose to not qualify the field name and just put L name here. And of course I get the full name. So if I were on table, I keep wanting to say table B, but let's call it table B, alias B. If I was on alias B, that's what it is, and I were to execute this, can you guess what would happen? I would not get an error. it would indeed print Mary Doom, because L name would refer to the L name in the current work area, which happens to be work area 2, but F name would refer to export 1, because I did qualify it by saying go to this alias and select this field name. So let's try this and see what we get here. And so this is misinformation because of what I specified here. To get Mary Polychronis, I of course would have to qualify it to get the proper information by specifying both export 1 and for the first name field and the last name field. Again, though the tables are aliased, the actual table names are shown here: one sample space data .dbf, and of course export space 1 .dbf. And because the space is an invalid character, FoxPro puts an underscore. Because this begins with a number, it uses a letter. Now I want to correct, there's an errata here where I did say that you can specify the default alias even though a table is not in there, and that is true for the first 10 work areas. So I can easily say select 10, which will always work. If you select and a number, that will always work, whether a table is open there or no. But if I use default aliases, select A, that will work whether a table is there or not. Select C. I don't have any table open. You can see there's no information in my status bar, and there's no information being displayed in the data session window. I can also select J. Once I get beyond J, Visual FoxPro starts to use the W sequencing as I showed you earlier: W11, W12, etc., right up to W32767 for a default work area when there is a conflict in the alias name, or it begins with an invalid character or has invalid characters in there. Okay, so the error I want to correct is I cannot say select W11 without a table being there. In fact, Visual FoxPro will give me an error saying that the alias is missing. So A to J is fine. Anything beyond that gives you an error. A table must be opened in that work area before Visual FoxPro will allow me to reference the work area using a default alias. I could say select 11 and not have a problem, but the default alias of W11 will give an error. I also wanted to point out one more thing, just for information's sake. When I did if I try to open, say, export 1, and when there's a space in the name, I have to surround it with quotes, and IntelliSense automatically did that for me. And I try to open this in work area 20. I can use random work area numbers. It doesn't have to be in sequential order. If I open this in work area 23, Visual FoxPro gives me a file use and error, and which is why I had to use the clause again. So Visual FoxPro knows that I'm wishing to or attempting to open the same table multiple times, and then this will not give me a file in use error, and shows the default alias, of course, as W23, because the alias that Visual FoxPro would have chosen, export _ 1, is already taken, so there's a clash. It, of course, goes to W23. Again, if you have any questions, let me put my email here. It's feedback@learnvisualfoxpro.com, and I'd be only too glad to point you in the right direction.